Offering of the Germans. The temperatures were often down to -20, even at one stage to -30. Meant that the casualties from frostbite was
Hey, Jez, I'm just going to mute you. There's a bit of telly noise in the background.
Oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, sorry.
Frankly, I'm disgusted that you're not concentrating fully on this.
I was just watching Hitler's invasion plans for Stalingrad.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, right up to the minute, topical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, I think we've probably got more chief than Indians here.
Right.
Cool. Well, let's start with, I know, Stephen, you've got a question. Probably the first question is, how do you take all that grease off your camera?
That's right, yes, I'm trying to rub it now, yes. That's just
it's no better.
Anyway, you can hear me.
Don't worry about your camera. What's your question?
Right, yes. Well, I've got my smartphone, and basically I want to be able to do as much as I possibly can off the smartphone. I've got quite a few. I've got quite a few apps on. I'll go through what I've got on regarding paragliding. I've got XC Track. I've got XC Guide. I've got TT Live Track 24.
Okay.
I've got Telegram. I've got Avario, Paragliding Map, IGC Viewer, and Avia Weather. So, you know, how best can I make use of this Android phone? That's the basic question.
Specifically for both flying and then preparing for flying?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've got many of the same apps. So for flying, let me just queue that up right now. So I'll just display my phone on screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, you seem as though you should. What do you guys see now?
It says ready for you to connect wirelessly.
Right. Okay.
So what app's this you're on?
So I'm just converting over to my phone so that you can see my phone on screen.
Right. Really good.
Okay. So like you, I've also got XC Guide. And XC Guide is just great. But really, it's I'd say best feature is in tying everybody's location together and then allowing Judith to track you when she starts retrieving you on the ground. Because is that going to be a thing? No.
No, very unlikely.
Judith's got better things to be doing. So under the wheels icon, the settings, I have a couple of things now. You have a Flarm or a Fanet device, don't you?
I've lost that. I left it on there. I lost it on the hill, and when I retrieved it, it wasn't working.
I remember you saying. Okay. So you can actually connect through things like an AirCube device, which sends out Fanet and Flarm signals. But what is most important, I think, is that this will act as an aggregator to send out your location via mobile phone. So obviously you need to keep your data on in the air. But it will send it to multiple places all at the same time. And I guess the two most important ones are Live Track 24. Now you need to set up a Live Track account for this, a Live Track 24 account. So you can see I've already got a Live Track 24 account. So hopefully you're making notes.
I'm going to record. This will all be recorded, so I'll be able to go over this, won't I?
You will be able to go over this. So your Live Track 24 is going to be there. And the other important one, I think, is going to be becoming more important, is Open Glider Network. And the Open Glider Network, Live Track 24 is okay for lots of people doing outdoor activities, sailing, cycling, walking, and paragliding, obviously, and hang gliding. But Open Glider Network also brings in all of the sailplane pilots as well, and things like balloons. So that's a way of your mobile phone through XC Guide telling sailplane pilots where you are. If they're already watching something that shows Open Glider Network in their cockpit, which, you know, it's pretty likely they will be, given that we're starting to do that now. So Open Glider Network, OGN is another one to set up your account on.
Yes. Is that another app then, Open Glider Network?
It is, yes, yeah. You know what? I'm just going to connect this to the right Wi-Fi.
Pete, I think you've got somebody trying to get in.
Okay, yeah. Okay, just whenever somebody's trying to come in, give me a shout, because I'll need to I'll need to manually bring them in. It's because I didn't put a password on this particular session. So just going back to connecting in to my phone, so I can show you what then happens, Stephen. Interestingly, it looks as though my neighbour is advertising their screen for me to connect to.
Have a look.
I will, well, yeah, I'll be having a look at that later tonight. Okay, yeah, so back to XC Guide, and just to show you the kind of thing that you see, I'm actually displaying my location through Flyme and Fanet, as well as my Flymaster Vario here. So, you know, you can see how I'm connected through the Open Glider Network. And if I zoom in a little bit more, I'm also connected through Airware. So both of those are how Flyme and Fanet is displaying my location. as well as Flymaster. And that's, you know, I mean, that's just something that's happened within the last few years, particularly with XC Guide. So just through my normal 2 instruments, I'm kind of displaying my location in 3 different ways. Now, what you can do, and I forget where you do this actually, but within XC Guide, because you don't want XC Guide running all the time. If you want to set yourself a like a flight to goal, say for example, you were wanting to set a goal to fly to Darlington from Windbank, then you'd naturally do that in XC Track. It's just a little bit better for setting up the tasks, but you still want within XC Track, you still want to see all of the people that are advertising where they are on screen. XC Track normally isn't very good for that, but if you set up a local host server in XC Guide, and this is where it gets a little bit involved, then XC Guide enables XC Track to see what it sees. Okay, so sounds a little complicated.
Yeah.
But as you can see, XC Guide has kind of picked me up at my house, funnily enough. But if I go through and show XC Track, I zoom in on my location at XC Track. There you go. You can see it's showing Pete L in 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and 3 of 3. So it's actually detected that I'm kind of in the same place, but with 3 identities. So XC Track, I think, tidies that up quite a bit more. Somebody who's done this before, if live tracking is enabled for who's set this up before? I've gone in and set up the connection sensors. Here we go. So you just set up a network port of 101.10. So setting up that network port allows you to pick up all of the data that XC Guide is reading. And also, if we go back to the browser that I'm using, then Neil Charles's, if you remember Neil Charles's presentation from a few months ago, Neil Charles's presentation, which I'll post the link for when we get back to the browser, has details of setting up that communication between XC Guide and XC Track so that you can see all the pilots in XC Track. Now, the second part of your conversation, Stephen, you've got a bunch of apps on there. I also have Avia Weather, because I think Avia Weather is absolutely fantastic for all of the local sites. So at the moment, I know it's westerly at Leeds Bradford, it's at 8 knots. That's not enough to fly the western slopes of Baildon. When I see that heat hit sort of 11 to 14 knots, then I know Leeds Bradford is great for the west face of Baildon. Don't go and fly the west face of Baildon. But at sort of 7 to 10 knots, it's good for Ilkley's northeast face. and adding a Moorside as well. So that's what I use the Avia app for, and that just takes the weather readings from the airports directly. And then I've got a couple of other apps, Windy for the weather. I don't use that particularly often. As you can see, the last time I was using it, I was out flying in California. I do use Meteo Blue for weather, particularly the meteogram side of things. I think the meteograms are really very, very helpful for flying weather. And paragliding map, because it's really helpful if I'm away with work or if I'm visiting in some new part of the country, then it's really helpful for, well, there you go. So I was looking as to whether I should go and fly the Wrekin in Telford last week because I was on the coaching course at the Lilleshall National Sports Centre. Any follow-up questions, Stephen?
No, I think I'll just have to go over it. You know, when I watch it later and go over it step by step.
Sure.
Yeah. And
So
also, yeah. The other thing from that is, I suppose it's an important thing when we're doing the having our meetings, you know, for learning cross country. You're sending out some information, and I'm not getting a proper view like you're showing here at home. So I need to be able to set that up properly as well, so that I can view it on my laptop.
okay, so that flight analysis and flights, yeah, reviewing flights. Yeah, yes. I'm going to definitely go through that later on in the session. Just rounding out what I keep on my phone most of the time. Of course, you know, I've got the Hullfoy weather stations, and they have a mobile version of what they display.
Yes, I've got that. Yeah,
got that.
Yeah.
I also have Campy for free flyers up, but everybody knows about that. RASP has a mobile site, or it's optimized for mobile screens as well. We'll go through that in a little bit of time. I always have the Met Office's regular forecast open. And quite often I have XCIT Aero, which I'll just open when I need to sort out a retrieve.
I think somebody's waiting to be let in. Oh, you can see.
Okay, let's disconnect the screen so I can go back to letting people in. Okay, the way the mobile phone screen displays, it's kind of an either or an or. So I'll go back to the regular PC screen now. Hold on. What are people drinking, by the way? I have Marsala Superiore Garibaldi.
The litre of Moretti for me.
Okay, well, I think, Jason, you've probably got the by far the most sensible option. Okay, next question. Questions?
I had a query just more on flying skills, really. I don't know if that's something you want.
Go for it, yeah.
Just really, I seem to be cursed with when everybody else is high, I can never get that high, but for some reason when others seem to drop down, maybe it's because I'm being more conservative, but that's the only time I seem to get high a lot of the time. Don't really know why. I don't think in hindsight nowadays, I don't think I turn tight enough in thermals. But I guess the question is, when you're searching for lift and trying to get high, what is it you're thinking about and looking for? And obviously, there's the clouds and the textbook stuff. But I think I'm missing something, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, is this generally in ridge lift, or is it in thermal lift, or is it
more so in thermic lift? Yeah.
In thermic lift? Okay, so part of that is visualizing the thermal, and so as you look up and people are sort of high, it's not a question of the fact that they're directly above you. And that you need to go directly below them as being the best way to start climbing in whatever they've climbed in. So I would say you've got to bring in the wind for the day and visualize where the wind's coming from, and then from there sort of project or visualize where that thermal is coming down to its source and its trigger. And that's where you need to be aiming for. So if you can imagine, let's say, for example, we've got your hillside here, and we've got a bunch of flyers up here, then being over the top of the hill, you've got to be in that area sort of in front of the hill where the thermal's taken off from. But the same goes for being without, away from the hill. In the flatlands, the wind is going to have been dragging that thermal along for quite a distance. If you think people are 3,000-4,000 foot high and you're at 1,000 foot, then you are sort of 2/3 the way, aiming for 2/3 the way more into wind than they are at the time. So visualizing the source and the trigger and projecting down to where it is and then intersecting is good. And then there's the technique and the sensitivity, and this is a very important skill, and it takes time, and it's using every sense you've got, the touch on the brakes, but also your balance, what the harness and the risers and the roll is telling you, and then tuning into what you're seeing and what you're hearing through the vario. So, depending on your vario, it might have a little bit of a lag, but for entering a thermal or just that leaving of a thermal, you'll have that little bit of a outside tip roll, and then you'll hear the vario trail off, or, you'll go into a thermal and bite, and then the vario will confirm actually how strong that was, and being in tune with that is really important. So, you know, I haven't changed my Vario since, I don't know, 2017, and I don't intend to. Because I'm just in tune with it, and so I don't have to make any adjustments to the way, you know, the inputs that I'm putting in.
You know what it's telling you. So.
Because yeah, I'm in tune with it, and and change is hard, you know. And there isn't a huge reason for changing. You know, one of the things that I did do was I dug out a Vario from the 1990s, and I was completely surprised at how sensitive it actually is. Now, I've forgotten completely where I put it. Doesn't matter, but the Vario from the 1990s was as sensitive as you needed it to be.
Can I offer my 2 penny, Pete?
Go for it, Kevin.
Just on a simple technique when you're learning to thermal, I've found is that if your vario's increasing in tone, if the lift's increasing, then increase your angle of bank, you know, turn tighter. And if the lift's decreasing, it's going away, then you do the opposite.
Straighten up.
Is that the right way around? I have to think about it now.
If it's
I think it's the
dropping-
other way around,
The other way
Kevin.
around. If the
Yeah.
lift's increasing, then you can widen your circle because you're going into the lift. And if the lift's decreasing, then you want to go back where you was. So you want to tighten your turn. So you don't just go round and round and round in the same circle. You vary your circle to suit where the lift is, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I've been trying that. Yeah, I think what I have, I think I never really expected thermals to be as steep as they often are, and the last session sort of and analysing things a little bit more has sort of hammered that home, I think. So hopefully I'll get out soon and be able to.
Yeah, a good strong.
Higher, it seems to get easier because when they're low down, they can be little and tight. But as you start getting up, they often widen out, and it gets easier as you get higher.
Yeah, thank you.
What else would I say? Sometimes don't be fooled by the first bit of lift you feel. Quite often, and this is particularly more noticeable on the hill, so those early climb outs, you'll sort of rise up, you know, as you come into a band of lift, as you've been going along the hill. You maybe turn out into it, and it'll go up for about 3 seconds, and you think, oh, that's it. Okay, let's work that.
Every time.
And really, that's quite often, you know, the sort of the downwind, the lee side of the thermal, and it's some of the turbulence associated with the thermal. It might not actually be the lift itself, the actual full thermal itself. So quite often I mutter things to myself just so it's fresh in my head. So the word I have for that is vanguard. Okay, so a little bit of lift on the outside of the thermal that it's like an outrider to the main thermal itself. So it's always worth exploring a little bit further out until you get that 1, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and then think about turning into it. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. I think I do that. That's a good call.
Yeah. So I mean, Tim Pentreath has spoken about that kind of thing before. Just when you do contact the lift, you might be on an outrider, go through, try and find the center, or hunt for the center even a little bit further out. it's not doing you any harm, particularly when you're climbing out on a more windy day. Being at the front end of a thermal, being at the windward side of it, is the best place to be anyway.
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay. So I said I'd do a little bit on weather. And Carl Scragg, is Carl here? No. But Carl did say he wanted to know what I do the night before.
Just before you leave the point of thermals, how, because I've found myself in a similar sort of scenario as was just being discussed around everyone's high. I seem to be able to get a bit of height, but nowhere near the sort of height that a lot of people seem to get. How far out in front or stroke behind the front of the ridge? I'm guessing, you know, obviously it's dependent upon wind strength and where you are, but I've tended to either go out what I've looked at afterwards as being too far out in front, or I get a bit shall we say concerned that I'm going too far back behind the ridge, and therefore shall we say at wind bank, where we get sort of above the sort of wall sort of area where you're a significant distance back from that front ridge, and starting to feel a bit nervous that I'm sort of, you know, potentially might get some rotor, or I'm below the thermal, or have you got any feeling to help with that? Am I in the right place hunting for a thermal?
Yeah, so I mean, so long as you're going over the wall, you know, and not kicking the capstones off the wall, you're not going to contact any sort of turbulence. The Dales Hills are particularly well rounded, so you know your areas of turbulence that you're going to get there are if you actually tuck in really behind the hill, and if you go round the end of a hill where it's emptying out into a valley, where it's going to sort of speed up going around the obstacle. I would say if you've got concerns about going over and being pushed back low, then it's on the same line as that thermal. You know, quite often and early in the day, you're not getting these big columns that are, you know, orderly columns that start from the source at the valley bottom. There are a series of bubbles at 11, 12, 1, even to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So at a site like Wind Bank, if I've gone over and a climb's weakened off, because don't forget, you're always descending through that rising air. So at some point it fizzles out. You know, I mean, that's always something that happens. I'll go, and you can see this very clearly on your instrument, because it's been giving you that thermal track quite often, and it's switched screens for it. I will just go straight back into wind, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to pick up your next climb. Might not be a banger, but you know, it's always worth going back out on that track to pick up the climb and the series of climbs. And you know, I do remember from the day that we had on Wind Bank on the 10th of April, where quite a few of us went cross country, that I was able to take a series of lifts just going straight out in front of the hill, and I was climbing in front of the hill. So that was lift that was coming off the back of the hill in front. So that
And-
I guess was sort of a little bit lee side, but you know, bearing in mind that the hill in front of Wimbank faces east, so that is your morning sight.
And was that significantly ahead of the hill, i.e., you know, above the river, the centre line of the valley ish, shall we say?
It was over the river, yeah.
Okay.
Would it be
It's
fair to
always-
say that you should push out a little bit more then? Because I'm quite conservative next to the hill a lot of the time. That to find the better lift, you should perhaps push out more regularly.
Snap, following you.
Yeah, so to once you've got some height, you know, once you're 500 foot, 400, 500 foot above takeoff, a good safe margin, then push out, because the rising air is more ordered, and you know, I've taken climbs out that have actually started quite early. And if you can find lift out front, then, you know, in terms of being able to observe, you know, a good strong climb that's forming on the hill, and a group of pilots taking that, because you're upwind of them and still at a good height, you can get back to them very quickly if you think that's worth doing, so that you're going out with a good gaggle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
So Stephen and Carl Scragg did ask about what I did the night before, and sometimes it's just follow what other people are doing. So have a look on the flying plans or one of the other WhatsApps. But I'll just go through, you know, what I might do for Saturday. So Saturday, I'm going to be here. I think the conditions are going to be better elsewhere in the UK, but I've got a couple of dogs to take care of, so I'm staying local. But Saturday is shaping up quite nicely. So the first thing that I'll always do is something that Northern Paragliding taught me from years ago. And it's just check what is the Met Office or what is the BBC forecast saying about the wind speed. And if it's over 10 miles an hour, maybe you should just bin the day. 10 is probably 10 miles an hour seems to be about the top of what most UK hills will allow you to fly in.
So
when
are they taking an average then to pick that 10? Because I look at windy and you go like 10's not a lot.
I you know, I mean, it's the weather forecast that's for the general public. So it's kind of the average of what you're going to feel for the day, and it just so happens that 10 miles an hour seems to be, you know, that then equates to about 15, 16, 17 miles an hour on the front of weather fell. Maybe if, you know, if that was Halls, you know, if we went up to Halls, then, I mean, it looks like it's going to be flyable somewhere around Halls, you know, east northeast, maybe on the end of 10 end or something like that. And then the other thing that I go and have a look at is the wind gust, you know. So it's doubling with the wind gust, which is fine. That means it's going to be sort of reasonably thermic. It's in the right direction. So I'm probably going to spend my time adding a moorside or Ilkley cow and calf that day with a couple of dogs underneath me. I'll be there for coaching if anybody wants to turn up and have some things signed off.
So from if you weren't staying local, obviously it's a difficult question, but where would you be looking at?
Well, that's where I'll come on to with.
Okay, sorry.
With the next sites that I go to, just let me. Okay. Generally, what I'll do is I'll confirm the direction with Windy, and just run that through to Saturday. See what it's saying.
Do you look for any correlation between the models, because sometimes they can vary hugely and sometimes they're all in line, and even when they're all in line, it doesn't necessarily, I accept it's a forecast, but it can tend to be fairly so is one better than the other? Yeah,
so I don't care which model is better than the other. I'm sure, you know, if you're a statistical physicist, then yeah, it'd be important. I just care about agreement. And I will go on using my ad blocker. So the way I figure out what's happening with agreement is that there's a site called Meteor Blue, and there's also an app called Meteor Blue. And what it allows you to do is to go onto meteograms and have a look at the multi-model. And that's where I get my sense of how reliable is this forecast, because you know you'll have a look at RASP, you'll have a look at the Met Office and the BBC, and that's just showing you one story. And the Met Office and the BBC, they're ensemble forecasts, so they're going to be fairly statistically right, but they're not going to tell you much about the agreement for the day, how risky that day is going to be. But you know, from Meteor Blue, it shows you on lines and graphs all of the different models that you could care about, the NEMS, the GFS, and NOAA, and the UK Met Office, and all sorts of you know, European short-term and medium-term forecasts. And you can get a very quick idea of the agreement on how much it's going to rain. So, you know, I'm going to bet a lot of money that it's going to be a bit damp on Friday evening, because all of the models are in agreement. Temperature we don't care about so much, but they also do wind speed and wind direction. So, you know, there's a little bit of disagreement starting to creep in on Friday, and Saturday's looking a little bit messy. And you can see that here, that the wind is coming from the west through Thursday and Friday. It's going north of west. It's also, the wind speed is also dropping at this time. So it's all very consistent that the wind speed's dropping, but it's not very consistent as to when the wind is actually veering through north and becoming east. So that says to me on Saturday, you know, if I'm thinking of going to Addingham Moorside or Ilkley Cow and Calf, you know, I better be up early if I want Addingham Moorside, because there's a risk it's going to have gone, you know, whatever that yellow dot thinks, it's already going to be on Baildon Hill by midday. So there's a bit of a spread in the forecast versus, you know, the spread here. And then I go to RASP, and David Headley wanted a bit of a lowdown on RASP, and RASP is, you know, it's incredibly complex. It's sailplane pilots and paraglider and hang glider pilots running their own forecasts for themselves. But it has been kind of simplified down to just the real bare bone essentials for what we need, I think. And you know, let's go and take Saturday as an example. And we're starting with the boundary layer wind. So that the boundary layer is everything from the surface to however high on the day the thermals are going to mix the atmosphere. So, you know, let's say this time of year it's going to be 6,000-7,000, maybe more feet. So the average wind for that actually looks quite high. So 1,300.
So that mixing level is above cloud base.
Oh yes, yeah. So, you know, the boundary layer includes cloud base, but will go up to the height generally that there's a big enough inversion to stop the atmosphere mixing fully. So, you know, now Saturday, I'm kind of thinking, panic. I might not get my flying in because it looks a bit strong. But one of the things you've always got to bear in mind with RASP is that there are graphs where the scale changes color, and then there are with the scale or the fixed values of the scale, and then there are graphs where it doesn't. And wind speed in knots is one of the graphs where it does change. So you can see here that, you know, we're looking at 6 to 10 knots around Addingham. So that actually looks quite fine at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then it all goes quite yellow, but that yellow is still 8 to 10 knots. So just be aware of little tricks like that the RASP graphs pull on you. They change scales on you. And that's, you know, maybe to do with the fact that they want to give you in an individual picture as much contrast as possible. But it is saying to me, you know, sort of by the end of the day, Baildon Hill is probably going to be, you know, sort of maybe worth visiting. It might be strong enough to actually soar on the east face of Baildon. Who knows? But of course, what you're looking for on a cross-country day, you know, once you've got a sense of the wind and how that wind's changing, always bear in mind, you know, if you're talking about 100 kilometers, if we're going from, let's say, Wind Bank here, 100 kilometers is way up in Sunderland here, and there's all about the same wind direction there. But if you go 100 kilometers in the other direction, you're heading directly south. So it's always worth bearing in mind how that wind is changing with longitudinal distance as well as, you know, wind changing with height. So the other things to take note of are thermal updraft velocity. And this is saying to me that the west of the country is going to be better than the east of the country. This very much looks like a large piece of high cloud that is blotting out sunlight, and it's going to be a fixture there over the northeast for the day as I flick through the hours. You can see the thermal updraft velocity is the thing that's tempting Joseph and probably one or two other people over to Llangollen on Saturday morning. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, for those who don't want to go as far as Llangollen, then, you know, Treat Cliff in the Peak District, you know, there's reasonable patches of lift there. What this is saying to me here is that there's going to be probably some significant cloud streeting, but also big areas of cloud. And that's no surprise, because if you remember, there's a high confidence from Friday, there's a high confidence of rain from Friday. So any day where you're going to have a bit of sun on the ground and expect some thermic activity and have a good lapse rate for the day, when that's had ground that's been freshly wet the night before or the day before, you've got to expect cloud that will start early in the day and will actually be quite persistent. It doesn't mean that the lift isn't there, that the thermals aren't there, but it does mean that there'll be quite significant areas of shade out quite often. So I would say it's a little bit more risky for cross country. You might get shaded out and put down on the ground because of big cloud development in the peaks. Stephen.
Yeah, I think somebody's knocking.
Yes, I'll just let David in, but
All right,
let's just see if anybody else is waiting.
Thanks, so.
Yeah, so just talking about Llangollen, but what got me interested in it, I use Windy quite a lot, and Windy's got a thermals view, which I find really useful because it gives you quite a lot of information in one screen. It lets you see kind of a star rating type of thing and the wind direction at the same time. If you go to the clouds menu, Pete, it's under there.
That sounds like a find.
Yeah, so Windy's not one
of
I've used a huge amount. I mean, it's
so go in clouds on the left-hand menu, Pete. Not that one. The one with where are you? You've got a list of things on the right-hand side: radar, satellite, wind. You've got clouds. Click on clouds. And you've got a sub-menu, and at the bottom of that, you might need to turn it on actually. If you go into more layers.
More layers. Thermals are a lot are right down. You have to scroll down.
Yeah. So click on more layers at the bottom of that menu.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then scroll down. It's worth having a login for Windy because then it will remember these configurations. If you take thermals on, so I use this view quite a lot. So Windy uses ECMWF as a model by default, which is apparently more accurate in longer distances than GFS, which RASP uses.
Yeah.
So if you're looking in the distance, then maybe Windy's a good one to look at if you're in Tuesday or Wednesday and looking what might be happening at the weekend. But yeah, basically this view, you can see the wind arrows, you can see the color scheme, which is basically the thermal height, orange being good and gray being crap, and then you've got these different icons. I've never actually managed to find a thing that explains exactly what all the stuff means. So you've just got to kind of
it's there.
It's what?
If you look at, you see the 3 bars at the bottom right that are showing you the different colors and stuff. There's a little question mark in a white circle. If you click on that, it'll explain, it'll give you a small explanation. See the question mark just above where your mouse is now, the top black bar. There's a question mark in a circle on the right. The very bottom right of that screen, there are 3
Oh, you mean the eye symbol?
bars. Yes, the eye symbol. Sorry, it's not a question mark. Click on that. There you go.
Okay, right.
There we go.
Scroll it. It'll explain. Now, there isn't a lot of icons. There's just the clouds. You generally only see clouds. So lots of big clouds means there's lots of cumulus, and little clouds means they're kind of sparse.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of what makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So basically, orange in little clouds is good.
It's not good. I think you want orange in big clouds.
Do you? Dense cumuli?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sparse.
Excellent. I will use that more in future. One of the other things that I will use RASP for are things like convergence as well, particularly if we're going to set a goal somewhere near the coast. And this was important on the 10th of April flight, simply because we were going to be flying near to the coast at Sunderland, is look for lines of convergence coming in, just to see how strong it is, and then I can be aware of it. Equally, you know, on light wind days, it's quite possible that you just get a huge amount of convergence over the Dales, where air mass from both sides of the country is drawn into the Dales, and that's not going to be Saturday. I mean, there's half an argument for going over to Lancashire for Saturday and flying there. I think it might be certainly better than adding a moorside. So I might consider that if I can find a decent easterly site somewhere in the Pennines that I can get to easily. Rain is always useful, and then star rating. The star rating and star rating for foot launchers, that only foot launchers just degrades the star rating based on the wind speed or the calculated wind speed. I just look at star rating and go from that. So it's looking at the moment, bearing in mind that, you know, there are 2 forecast runs a day that RASP does, and the latest one, which has already run this evening, I think they output at about 7 o'clock in the evening, and by 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, it actually takes all night to run and all day to run, so it's spitting out new results as it goes. But it looks like the 7 o'clock in the evening has run has put the high quality air even further west. Yeah, so for David Headley and for you, Stephen, that's, you know, it's I'm not doing anything complex, particularly with the RASP. You know, the only things that I would say are missing from here are back on the full parameter list. Quite often I like to see something called normalized surface sun. And that's just the amount of sun hitting the ground. And you can see here that from, you know, let's say 11, you know, we have got a huge amount of cloud sat over the northeast, which is suppressing all activity. And that, you know, as the easterly wind comes in, that's spreading further into the country through the day. So that says to me, you know, the further west you are, then the better days flying you're going to have, probably. In terms of thermic, you know, in ridge lift, that's just wind speed and wind direction. So all I'll do is maybe do that the night before, and then on the morning just have a very quick confirmation that nothing major has changed. And if nothing major's changed, then, you know, we'll plan to go to the area or the site that we talked about, or we'll make a quick dash somewhere else. You know, the choices being the lakes, the North Yorks Moors, the Dales, or the Peak District, or even as far as Llangollen and North Wales. Any questions on that? No, lovely. So one of the other areas, Stephen, I know you'd asked about, and one or two other people were curious about, was flight analysis. and I'll do a bit about this, and maybe David, who's done quite a bit, you can have a chat about it as well. But again, I'm sort of quite simplistic on flight analysis, in that we can pick up anybody's flight that's been posted to the XE League. So if we go to my flight from the 10th of April, the track log is always, you can download that IGC very, very easily. So that's already in my downloads file. And of course, it's kind of an okay view, but you don't get much sense really of what's going on there. You just get a sense of height from the colouring. But what I like to do for fairly simple flight analysis is to use flyxc.app. And this is both good before and after, because you can have a look and bring in and out airspace, but also bring in and out XC planning. So let's say I wanted to go from here to land. I don't know. Let's go to Edinburgh St John. Well, I know I'm going to be flying through a particular danger area. So that's a particularly sort of useful feature. What am I going to have to do to avoid danger areas on my flight track? And I know the direction of my flight track because I'm doing this flight planning after I've looked at the night's forecast, so I know roughly what the wind direction is going to be. And this then becomes even more useful because I can then, if I'm using flyxc app, it will generate the task, and in XC track, I can bring up the camera feature in XC track, take a photo of that, and then that's already in as a navigational task as I arrive on site for the day. Or I can download that track, and as I download it, if I've been doing that track on my mobile phone, I can download it. If I just double click on that download on my phone, it will bring it into XC track as a navigational task. So that's something worth practicing a couple of times before you go to site. But it's a really good way of organizing how you're going to put a task together and share a task between you, either the night before or when you're on site itself. But for flight analysis, there's some really great features in flyxc.app. And one of those is just having a look at all of the skyways. So these are all of the tracks of previous XC flights. And you can zoom in on this, and it actually gives you great hope. I find that so many routes have been done in this area before. So even as you're crossing, you see here Preston under Scar and West Whitton. So we're crossing Wensleydale here. You can see from people's tracks that there are climbs here. You can see a great density of climbs here in the middle of the valley. And that absolutely coincides with actually what is quite a big lump in the middle of Wensleydale. You never notice it when you fly over it, but there's quite a big hill, a couple of 100 feet high at least, between, the exit of Bishopdale and probably Coverdale or somewhere like that, right into the middle of the valley. And you can see here from all of this concentration that there's been a lot of climbs around there. And then off the quarries themselves, and off of the steeper ground as you go over to Napa, I believe that's Napa there. So all that you need to do to bring that flight in is just go and upload. So you can see here that flight. All I need to do is just bring it in, upload it, and there you have it. There are other great features, so you can have airspace or no airspace. Bringing airspace in allows you to see here as I crossed what looks like through a piece of airspace. Now this is the flight corridor that steps down into Newcastle Airport. But you can see here that was a control area and therefore up in the air. Did I get that the right way round? And that as I was climbing up towards it, I never quite reached it. I was hundreds of feet away, so I was quite happily flying under that piece of airspace. And then tracking along the airspace that you can see is from 3,000 feet to 10,500 feet flight level. So actually I could have taken a more northerly route and flown under that. But my goal was sort of an easy route to Sunderland Railway, and what I thought would have been a quick retrieve on the train. It turned out on the day that the quick retrieve was the taxi home and was cheaper than the train. And then you can see here, this is a flight I'd love to do, is just going all the way up and down the coast from I guess Seaham south to. This is way further north than where I'm thinking of, actually. Yeah, I was getting it confused with Saltburn and Skinning Grove and Marske. I didn't know this area of coast was flown. That looks great. So FlyXC app is absolutely wonderful, for all of the features of being able to put airspace on Plan XCs and then identify which pieces of airspace that you're interested in, and also the airways as well, where other people have flown. But then, for that proper 3D view, then you can't beat Google Earth Pro. So Google Earth Pro, generally Google will want you to use Google Earth in a browser. But Google Earth Pro, if you look for it, is still an app that you can use, and you can orient in 3 dimensions around where you want it to be. So if I maybe zoom in here. Takes a bit of getting used to. And then you can have a look around at all of the messing about in the sky I was doing in the quarries. And then see about the climbing out I've done. I appear to have crashed. Yeah, I'm right up against the ground, so that's not going to work. Okay, any questions on flight analysis?
So I'll throw, can you hear me?
Yeah, David,
Okay.
I'm sure you've
So
got a lot to say.
Well, yeah, well, not you pretty much covered most of it. So there's sort of two things. One, there's the flight planning, which FlyXC is brilliant for. It's where, you know, you decide, what am I going to do today? I'd like to go from Windbank to whatever, Newcastle. FlyXC is brilliant because you can look at your track, you can look at the airspace, you can kind of work it out, and then you can export it as a task that you can load into your flight software, so that you can follow it as you're flying. So that's brilliant. So that's flight planning. What I find I do a lot of is flight analysis. So this is after the fact, generally because I've landed earlier than others, and I want to find out, is there a reason why? I don't like it when I would land early and the answer is there is no reason. It just happened. I like to try and figure out, what is it I did wrong, or what did I do differently that put me on the ground. And there are two sort of layers to that. One of them is to get a rough idea of your data points. So things I find very useful is to use a site like XC Globe, where you can load your IGC, and it gives a lot of sort of analysis points. Like a big one I use is my turning circle. What's my average thermaling circle, or my average speed, things like that. Now, those numbers on their own don't mean an awful lot unless you can compare them to somebody else on the day. Because then you can see, how do I compare to others on the day? And especially if you can compare them to the people who have done well on the day from the same site. You might find, for instance, one of the things I noticed 2 years ago is my turning circles are too wide. They were consistently too wide compared to people who are doing better than I was. So I made a conscious decision, I need to thermal tighter. And then I worked out mechanisms to help me do that as I'm flying. Now, the other thing then I use, and it's when I go into Google Earth, I use Google Earth to go right into the micro scale to actually see right time down to a point in time. I will load a number of IGC tracks from the day from the same site. I have set it up so that there's a timeline on Google Earth so that you can step through the flights and see where every person is on their track at the same time. And what it makes it very easy for you to spot those crux points, the points where you may have made a decision differently to somebody else, or maybe you're a little bit lower at that point than they were, and that meant you couldn't make the crossing, or you went a little bit too south there, whereas they went a little bit north. And you can see, you know, you could look at Google Earth profile and go, well, that makes more sense to have gone a little bit north because, you know, it's following the line of the high ground, or it was more into wind, or so I find Google Earth really good for getting into the tiny detail of a point in time. Why did I land there? And then other sites like the FlyXC, which is brilliant for showing you sort of on a macro scale, you know, show me my flight and I can see the track I took and I can see my height profile underneath. I can see the airspace, so I can see how I tried to navigate airspace. It gives you a sort of a higher level view of the flight. So I use, when I'm analyzing a flight, I'm getting a higher level view of the flight using things like FlyXC or XC Globe or XC Analytics.F4 is really good It's an app you can put on your phone, so you might want to put that in your phone, Stephen. It gives you a lot of data points, a lot of graphs on your flights. And these graphs don't make a lot of sense on their own, but if you compare them to other people who are flying on the day, you may be able to identify patterns where you go, they're always getting a 10, but why am I always a 16? You know, whatever that number might be. You might start to see patterns and you say, right, that's a weakness of mine. I don't do that as well as that other person. I don't fly as fast. I don't thermal as well. I don't get the same lift. You know, if my average lift on a day is 3 meters, somebody else who's flown the same day, at the same time from the same site is getting 4 meters a second. Well, there's obviously something wrong with my thermaling and I need to figure out what to do about it. So those are the two I use. I use the sites that give me all of these data points to try and see is there patterns in my flying that need improvement. And I use Google Earth then when I load in a load of IGC files and I step through them slowly over time to try and identify where did I go wrong? What did I do that put me on the ground? And it'll be different for everybody, you know? So those are the tools I use.
Thanks, David.
Does that make sense? Right, that's me.
Any more questions?
Sorry, by the way, anybody who might want Google Earth, I've loaded the Google Earth installer. The Google Earth Pro isn't available anymore from Google. You can't get it. They're pushing everybody to, they have a Google Earth Online where you can do most of what Google Earth Pro does online through a website, which is great. What you can't get is the timeline. So it means you can't load a couple of IGZ files and then start moving the timeline forward and seeing how people are moving relative to each other along their tracks, which is hugely useful, I find. So I've put the Google Earth Pro installer on the share, but it's only for Windows. I don't have it for, well, I don't even know if Google Earth runs on Apple. So it's up on the Google share, the DXCA share, if you want it. Plus all of the IGC files in KML format. They're all there as well, going back, well, forever. From 2021 right back to the beginning of time, from all the UK flights from the Dales. So if you want to look at your flights from other years and compare them to other people on the day, all of those KML files are available on the DXCA share on our Google Drive. So
is that share on the say Telegram group or WhatsApp group?
Should be, yeah. If it's not, we can get it on. So there's only certain things really that you want to look at when you're flying. You look at, how's my thermaling? So how do I put a value on my thermaling? How good is my thermaling? Well, it's easy enough. You measure it against the people you fly with. If they are consistently getting higher than you or climbing faster, well, then obviously you have more to learn in thermaling. If you were consistently top of the stack or consistently out climbing people, climbing up through them, well, then your thermaling is pretty good. Once you've got your thermaling right, as far as I'm concerned, it's decision making. It's what puts you on the ground. You don't have to be the best thermaler to fly 100K. You know, average is enough, but you have to be a good decision maker because you're going to make a lot of decisions between your start and your end of 100K, and you have to get them mostly right. Otherwise, you'll be on the ground. And decision making is the hard one to learn, I find.
I did mention very, very much earlier on that Neil Charles's presentation from, I can't remember whether he was at the January or February club night, probably the February one actually. as well as the flight tracking that he goes through in a fairly sort of simple to understand way, which helps you with all the apps on your phone, Stephen, including how to link it to your live track and Open Glider network accounts. There's also at the back end some guidance on XC track. XC guide itself. And then flight analysis in a logging app. So AirTome or AirTome is one as well.
I seem to remember there was some conversation around which was better, either XC track or XC guide. Which do you mainly use?
So I use
XC Soar was the other one initially.
Yeah.
XC Guide is a relatively new addition. It was the bigger conversation usually was between XC Track and XC Soar initially.
Yeah. So XC Guide, its wonderful functionality is in bringing everything together, all of the flight tracking, and then showing you other people around you that are using flight tracking as well. And the first thing I went through, possibly before you got in, actually, Carl, was where you're able to join XC Guide and all of the information that it gets about tracking, and then it acts as a server app to XC Track, which then you can see all of the other pilots on. So XC Track is great for setting tasks, and the map just seems to work a little bit better, actually, although it's horses for courses. But it's easier to set up and share a task in XC Track. But it's all fine now because you can see the pilots that XC Guide finds for you in XC Track once you've set it up. And so I went through a little bit of that very early on. It'll be on the recording when I post it. But also it's in Neil Charles's presentation in about, sort of slide. Yeah. Slide 40, 41 is the one that you want. That will allow you to join them together. And I've just posted the link there. You can see the link there as well. So you can have both.
So, Pete, what's the best way of practicing these things before you actually go flying? You just have a group of friends and just, try and sort of link up sort of thing?
Yeah, so make sure you can put a task in. So next time you're walking around the moor, make a few waypoint markers. Then at home, make a task to go from one waypoint marker to another waypoint, or just use XC Track and put a pin down as a waypoint marker and then fly to it, and have a 400 or walk to it, have a 400 meter or smaller cylinder around it. And you can see how a task like that then works. And then get used to the sharing of tasks in XC Track so that you can show somebody else your QR code, and then they can see it in their XC Track as well. If that's the thing that you want to do. But mainly, get to use XC Track, get to know the fact that it's got a different bunch of screens, one for airspace, one for navigating the 2D view of seeing where you are and making sure you're under airspace. And then there's also the thermaling screen as well. And unfortunately, those are kind of available only when you're flying. They may be available in a sort of a walk back feature, but I'm not familiar with that in XC Track. I know that XC saw an LK8000 as apps. They certainly do have it, but I don't particularly use those apps anymore.
You can. XC Track, you can play an IGC file in it and it'll play it as if you've flown it.
You can play it back.
You can move between,
right.
You can move between the screens and everything as it's going through it. So that's also a good way of learning, you know, what these screens are telling you and how you might use them when you're flying. Just play one of your IGC files through XC Track.
Okay.
Yeah, now is a good
We
time.
are absolutely right on time. It's been an hour and a half. Excellent. Unless anybody has any more questions, I'll close it out and post the recording.
Cheers. Thanks for that,
Yeah,
Pete.
thanks
And
very
David.
much.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Pete.
That's an empty bottle of Garibaldi now. See you, folks.
See you.
Thanks, Pete.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye-bye.